Hello, welcome back. I'm glad you returned. I have another block for you. This one's a fun one. Look at that pattern. Isn't that kind of fun? From far away, it looks far more difficult than it really is. All you're going to be doing is repeating a knit 5, purl 5, knit 5, purl 5, but you have to pay attention to the pattern. It is a pattern that I find hard to read. I can't really look at it and tell where I am. So the best approach is to use your marking tool and follow down one row at a time. That's what I would suggest. It's got these nice little, this is a block all in itself. If you do a whole lot of these little squares, I call them my little half square triangles. They're purl on one corner and knit on the other corner, and they're fun. This just takes it a little bit further and gives you this nice, it kind of is accordion, but once it's in your Afghan, it will be perfectly fine. So as always, I have the knitting pattern down below in the description box. Print it out, write it out, follow it. I got halfway done and I ran out of yarn. And remember, I told you start the yarn at an edge. That's the best approach. And then you don't have any ends, any tails that are trying to pop through. So I reattached my yarn a few days later and I continued on up, and I was fine, perfectly happy. But when I looked at the whole block, I was one row off, because it's hard when you're actually knitting to tell the right side from the wrong side. I mean, it kind of was for me. I think that's where I when you're an experienced knitter, you get a little cocky. I can do this. I got this. This is an easy pattern. Well, I mistook a right side row for a wrong side row, and I continued on, got all the way up, and I didn't notice until I went like this. It was very obvious. So after you've knit a few rows or maybe a repeat, take a look at your knitting. Hold it, from far away and inspect it. Because if you make an error, you want to get it out as soon as you can. You want to correct it. So that's why I advise follow the instructions, follow the directions, and move your marker down when you're done with the row. A lot of times, when I stress this, it's because I'm almost done. The phone rings, I'll move my marker to the next row because that's where I need to start. When I come back to it, just finish the row and then I'll be on. But don't do that, because sometimes you finish the row and then move the marker down and you're going to be one row ahead. So better safe than sorry. This is a fun one. But what we're going to do today, we're going to learn how to finish off our blocks so that we can seam them together more easily. So if you can see the white, this is one of these ribs that I told you I knitted it like this, but I don't want it to finish like that. So it looks like it's a little gaping and puckered, but when it's actually in the Afghan, it will be stretched out more like this. And this white edge, this is a crocheted edge all the way around. What I'm going to do is I'm going to butt two of them together, and I'm going to sew these together by using a whip stitch on the reverse side, and I'm going to go through this white. Now, you can very carefully count out that you need 32, these are single crochets, and I'm going to show you how to do them. You can count out that you need maybe 30 across the bottom and 34 up on the top, but let me tell you, every block is going to be slightly different. There are going to be very firm very firm blocks that really hold their shape nicely. They're going to be easy to do. They're going to be very, very easy to do. And then there's going to be the ones that roll. This one's rolling in. It's rolling, toward that side. This is our second block, the stockinette stitch. And this is why people put ribbings on sweaters, to keep this from happening. So this one's going to be a little more tricky, and sometimes you are going to be using this row of crochet. You're going to be using it to sort of harness in your block, to kind of make it control the block a little bit better. It's not going to be perfect. This is a block that I'm not going to put on the edge of my Afghan. I need 2 firm blocks on either side and 2 firm blocks top and bottom to kind of reel this in. And this one was a starting block. So it may be that you want to leave this one out of your Afghan, just use it for educational purposes. I think later on though, remember I talked about duplicate stitch. We're going to see a little bit of that later on in this tutorial on weaving in your ends when doing the crochet edge. This is a nice palette for a decoration. Like I said, you can duplicate stitch a flower, you can duplicate stitch anything. Maybe an initial. Whoever this is going to, say it's going to a child, maybe you want to put their initial on it. Maybe you want to put your initial on it because you're proud of it. You've done this. This is your first Afghan and you're proud of it and you want to show it off. It's perfectly, acceptable to put a big letter in there. I can see an S in there, or an A, or an M, just any kind of initial. Or gosh, I spelled out Sam. You could even, if this was for a Sam, girl or boy, you could put that across. So you might want to put this stockinette stitch in because it's an accomplishment. It's a major pattern. It's not great in this Afghan, kind of loosey-goosey, but stockinette stitch is wonderful in so many things. Sweaters, socks, anything. So keep this around. But these are fun. I have lots of them now, and they're all, here's another sort of floppy one because it's basically the stockinette stitch. This was our shaker. This one gave me quite a headache the other day. I think I mentioned that I had really gone off acrylic. This is the block that did it. But I think it's okay. I've made my peace with it. I took a look at it and I said, gosh, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. So maybe acrylic will live again. But yeah, so I thought I would show you how to do these. It's a step that you don't need to take. It's definitely a step you don't need to take, but I like the pop of an additional color. Mine are in white. I love the white with the blue. I love the white with all of them. It gives a nice clean edge, a pop of color, a base for you to seam the blocks together, because remember, the row gauge and the stitch gauge are not going to be alike from one block to the next. And as much as you want a perfect seam, sometimes you just have to, what I'm going to tell you is you kind of go where the crochet hook wants you to go. So I am probably not going to be matching up stitch for stitch, but it's going to be close enough. If you seam 5 or 6 or 7 of these together and then skip one, it's going to be fine. You'll see, it'll all come together nicely. So I'm going to show you how to do the crochet. It is optional, but it's a good thing to learn a little bit of crochet when you're learning to knit. Like I said, I'm not a great crocheter. I really am not. I admit that it's one thing in the fiber world that I'm really not that good at. But I know enough to get by. And I know that there are a lot of times when you are going to want a little bit. Oh, this sweater that I'm wearing actually has just a little bit of crochet, these little scallops. I wanted just a little bit something more on this sweater. So I picked up a crochet hook. I think when the sweater was all seamed together, I picked up a crochet hook and I just did little scallops along the edges, and I love it. It's just that nice little touch. So it's always good to learn a skill. Even if you don't have a passion for it, even if you're not going to pursue it as a hobby, it's good to incorporate with other things. So hold on for a second. Let me show you how to get this done. Okay, how do you like the overhead? It's a lot more helpful, isn't it? So before I begin, I want to mention one more thing. With this block that we're doing today, do you see how nice this edge is? Every row begins with a knit, or gosh, I'll have to check the pattern again, but I think every row begins with a knit. And so what you're doing is you're working in what's known as an edge stitch. I haven't introduced you to edge stitches yet. And what they are, remember when I was talking about the garter stitch, how nice it is, it holds everything firm when you're doing something like an Afghan? It's sort of a way of putting in a garter stitch. Just one stitch in, one stitch on each side. And that's enough to hold a lot of things steady. On this first row, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll sneak a little bit of seed stitch in, maybe 1 or 2 rows of seed stitch. And just to get that knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl kind of thing going is enough to stabilize certain things. So when you add an edge stitch, you're also adding in a little bit of width. And some of these blocks, you know, we're trying to stick at 7 inches and we're trying to have them all consistent. So I have not added edge stitches in, but it's something for you to think about in the future. You might want to just automatically, what you can do is you can slip the first stitch purlwise, knit all the way across, and then knit the last stitch. And generally what you do is you take the pattern count. Say you need to cast on 32 stitches for the pattern, you'll cast on 34 so that you will have 1 edge stitch, which is not included in the count. And generally speaking, that gives you a nice edge from which to seam one piece to the other. So it's almost like this is your salvage. If you're a sewer, you want to build in your salvage so that when you sew, this disappears and you just have your pattern. If we made this the salvage, you know, you'd kind of be losing part of your pattern. So that's something to think about. Now, to get this crochet going, this is a crochet hook. I know that you've all seen crochet hooks. This is a size G. And I'm not even sure if they still do these in letters. I've seen some in numbers, and I just, you know, like I say, I'm not a crocheter. I have a very, very small one, a hook, and then I have this one, and then I have a larger one, and that's really all I've ever needed. So I use this one for anything that I've knit from, you know, a size 6 needle, knitting needle, to a size 8. It works just fine. As you're going to see, you kind of are creating your own stitch size. So now what I like to do is I like to start along the side. I don't want to start in the corner because corners are going to be dealt with differently. So let's poke this in here. This is a little fluff that I have from one of my ends. Remember I said try not to cut it off flat, you know, flat with the fabric. It's okay to see where those are, and for right now I think I'll trim it off just so that it doesn't confuse anybody or get in our way. Now what we want to do is go into, here you can see it pretty well. Here's our knit stitch, and here's our garter edge. We want to go in right there between the two stitches. Now you could start in the very, very edge. Let's pick up a very, very edge. But sometimes what that does is it kind of stretches this out. We want to go in between the first stitch and the second stitch. That's the best approach. So just stick your knitting needle or your crochet hook in, leave a little bit of a tail, because you know we want to weave this in nicely, so we want a little bit of a tail. I'm going to switch hands so that I can hold the tail under my pinky of this hand. I'm going to grasp the tail and the work. Now what I'm going to do is a chain. A chain, you just wrap the yarn around and pull it through the loop. And what I meant by you're making your own stitch sizes, you can pull this really, really tight, or you can kind of give it a little bit of slack. We want to go for that happy medium. So a single crochet, and when I said let the crochet hook go where it wants to go, if you just kind of stretch out the knitting a little bit, the crochet hook will know where to go. It's going to find the path of least resistance. Now we're going to wrap this around again. That's called a yarn over. Pull it through. So we've got two loops. Now we're going to do another yarn over and pull it through both loops. And we've got a nice little stitch. Hopefully you can see that. So we are just going to, not every row, but what we're going to do is aim for what you're comfortable with, what looks good. Let the crochet hook kind of guide you. So we're just going to do a few stitches, and then we're going to look at our work. We're going to kind of stretch it out a little bit, you know, and see, is that something that we're happy with? I'm happy with it. It's possibly, these are maybe spaced out a little bit far. The nice thing about crochet, very easy to rip it back. Put your crochet hook in. I'm going to do these a little more close together. So let's do some of these and see what happens. Now, if we pull it out a little bit, can you see how it's kind of waving a little bit? Might be a little hard to see, but when you multiply that by the entire length, you don't want it to be too wavy. So we don't want to do far apart. We don't want to do too close together. So how about we do a few of them close together, and then maybe space one out a little bit more. And make sure that you bring your yarn through cleanly. What I'm doing is sticking my crochet hook in, I'm drawing it through, and when I draw it through, I'm pulling my knitting apart a little bit so that it goes through easily. And I'm giving it a little bit of slack. See, I'm controlling it with my finger, my index finger. That's where I'm tensioning. And I think that's why I don't get on so well with crochet. It's hard for me to tension in this finger. It's very hard for me to hold on to the yarn with my pinky. I've got pretty bad arthritis in this pinky. And so doing anything with that for a prolonged period of time hurts. I've tried the loop-de-loop on my finger and it's too tight. So that's my issue. I cannot get a good tension on my crochet. And I tend to worry about it and get more anxious, and then I get tighter and tighter, and then it just makes it worse. But can you see, that's looking pretty good. I hope you can see that clearly. So it gives this nice little edge, just a little pop of color, not too much. Now we're going to do the corner. And what we want to do in the corner is we want to turn it smoothly. And as with everything, there are various ways to do this. Some people do a single crochet, and then they do 2 chains, and then they do another single crochet, and that turns the corner. Can you see that nice corner? I have never done it that way. Instead, what I like to do, I'm a fan of the number 3. I like to do things in multiples of 3. And so I've done my single crochet. I'm going to go back through the same hole. We're going through the same hole. I hope you can see that hole. I'm just going to do, that's my second, that's my third. I'm going to do 3. And it gives it a more rounded, I think it gives it a more rounded appearance. And I like that. And then, now we were working on our rows. Now we're going to be working on our top and bottom edge. This is a little trickier. You can go through where you can see this bind off edge. And, you know, it's kind of hard to go underneath. It's tight in there. So what I like to do is I like to go through this stitch. Just punch it through the middle of the V. And generally speaking, you can go stitch for stitch along the top and the bottom edge. And when I say stitch for stitch, it means our crochet gauge matches our knit gauge pretty well. I'm going to go stitch, 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 and then I'm going to skip a few, like maybe 2 or 3. I'm going to skip 2 or 3. And that gives a nice look to it. And again, I'm just kind of letting the crochet hook dictate where it goes. I'm going to aim it to where I'd like it and then kind of let it do the rest. Row gauge, you know, it's not 1 row for 1 stitch. It's different. It's more like 1.5. So row gauge is always going to be a little more tricky than stitch gauge. But this is how you do it. You just kind of, you have a nice rhythm going. And here I just went in between the stitches. You can also do that. Instead of going straight through the V, you can go in between the 2 stitches. So again, do it several ways and see what you like best. You know, I'm going to go back into the stitch here and another stitch here. And when you're looking at the whole thing, you really can't tell whether I've gone through a stitch or whether I've gone in between. At the end of the day, you're not going to notice it. This is for seaming purposes and a pop of color. Nobody's going to be you know, unless you're putting this in to be judged, nobody is going to be inspecting it. And the stitches are laying nice and even. The rows will even out. The width, I should say. The width is going to even out when you attach it to another block. So I'm just going to go all the way around till it meets up with the other side. And then let me show you what we're going to do from there. I have this nice piece. I didn't want this to disappear, so I looped a little piece of yarn through it, and it's never good to change things, is it? Then you don't know where you are. So I might have to redo that last stitch. Okay. Yes, we're going to redo our last stitch. Now what I like to do is I like to do the last single crochet so that it's close to where I started. You see, that's where I started. This is the last one. It's pretty close. When I'm done, I'm going to cut the yarn about that much is fine. And just go like that. And what that does is it doesn't form a knot. It's not forming any more bulk. It goes through pretty nicely. And now you can crochet this together, but you know I'm not really great at crochet. So in my little bag, I have my needle. Remember this needle that I was talking about once before with the very narrow eye? I showed you on a very, very poor attempt at filming how to get this in. And remember I was talking about all the little floofies? These are all the little floofies. You're not going to get those all in. So what I like to do is fold it over just a little bit and pinch it tight. Pinch it tight. See, my finger is tight. And then you can put it through the eye much more easily. This is about all that goes through. Just grasp it gently and pull. If you don't get all of the plies of yarn, do it again. Don't try to mess with it, getting all the plies through. You're never going to win. So what I like to do is a little bit of duplicate stitch. Now, do you see this stitch right here? This is our very first stitch. It's going underneath, you know? So that's what I'm going to do with this yarn. I'm going to go underneath where the first stitch connects to the second stitch and pull it together. I'm not going to pull it too tight for now, but I'm just going to pull it together. Then I'm going to go through the center of this stitch and pull this stitch apart a little bit. Can you see? And now this one, it doesn't make that much difference that I can see whether I go backwards and put it through here or go forward and put it through here. But you just want to bring this yarn to the back, and I'm going through a clump of crochet. I'm going to go through one of those clumps so that it secures it pretty well. And I don't want to pull it too tightly. I want it to mimic the stitch. So I want to try to get the same tension that the original stitch was made with. And I'm just going to turn it over. Here's a good way of showing you. I'm not going to go straight through where I came out. Maybe next to it. And I'm going to go down a little bit. This is the back stitch I was telling you about. I'm going to go back and I'm going to catch this little strand of white in my needle, pull it through, catch this one in my needle. See, I'm going backwards and then forwards. And I'm coming out where there's a little bit of white. Because the rule with weaving in ends, you always want to match your colors. Okay, so there's another one. And I can just clip off my tail. Now, I've left a little bit. I haven't left a lot. Can you see it's poking up a little bit? I've woven in my ends in the white. I haven't looped it. Let me show you. Let me show you why you want to weave in your ends. And this one's being a little bit tricky. This one doesn't want to go in easily. You don't want to, here's the diagonal stitch that I was telling you about, and I'm just skimming the very, very tops. Just skimming the tops. If I go in diagonally like that, if I'm using blue, you wouldn't see it, but you sure can see that white, can't you? So we want to carefully take that out, because that's not the look that we're going for. We want the back to be as neat as possible, and it doesn't mean any extra effort to get a neat back. It just means thinking about what you're doing and get all those plies where they belong. It means getting where you need the color to be, securing it, doing another back stitch to secure it. In this case, the purl bumps or the crocheted bumps, we work to our advantage. They're a little bit bulky, which means that you can stick your yarn in there and, you know, you don't see it. So what do you think? What do you think? Do you like the edge? I think it gives a nice border. I think it finishes off the blocks. And now what I've been going on endlessly about, wool, wool, wool. You're saying, oh my gosh, shut up about the wool. If you're blocking a piece, what you want to do is get a nice board or towel or, you know, the rug on the floor, the carpet. And you want to get some T-pins. I don't think I have a T-pin with me. Let me look in my bag. You want to get a T-pin. They are rust proof, which doesn't mean a whole lot now because pretty much, you know, you're safe with anything you buy these days. But well, it doesn't appear that I have a T-pin. But I will show you one eventually. You want to get a T-pin and you want to pin your block in shape. So you're going to be pinning, you know, all the way across. I have on my blocking board, it's just a piece of old, you know, I want to say styrofoam, but I know it's not styrofoam. It's foam board or something thick. I have a linen towel on top, and it's got the lines that go across. It forms a grid. The weave forms a grid, so it gives me a nice place to secure it where I can line things up, and that's always handy. So you want to get a nice straight line, and then you want to get a nice straight line over there. You pin it all, and then you take a squirt bottle and you mist it until it's wet with water, and you just leave it until it dries. And when you take it off, the wool retains the shape that you placed it in. If you pulled it way out like that, it would retract maybe a little bit, but it would keep the shape. And that's why blocking is great. Acrylic doesn't block well. Acrylic does its own thing, like I said. But I hope you'll give this a try. Adding the pop of color is very, very nice. Let me take you to the other camera. Hold on. Sorry, I don't look like looking at videos where you can't really see the action. You're just staring at a board. So, yeah, I hope you'll give these a try. And I'm like I said, I'm doing white, but equally nice is a dark color, as slate gray. Black is maybe a little too harsh, but if you're doing light blues and light greens and things like that, you know, do a navy blue around. That would look pretty. Opt for tan. You can't go wrong with tan, or a light gray or a medium gray. Explore different color options, and you know, you might even want to get really adventurous. One thing you can do is knit all your blocks in the same yarn, but do the crocheted edge in different colors. That would look pretty cool too. So give this, not this block. Which block are we doing? I have to find my block again. Where is my block? Here it is. Yeah, give this one a try. This one's a fun one. Get a little bit of a crochet edge going. You can see whether you like it. If you don't like it, don't do it. You know, but it's a good thing to learn. And you know, I've said it multiple times. I'm not great at crochet. I don't feel comfortable holding the hook. I'm okay at it. Would I want to make a big Afghan out of crochet? I don't feel that comfortable. You probably won't at first either, unless it's the hobby that you've been drawn to your whole life. That hook is going to feel a little foreign, you know. So, but with anything, practice makes perfect, or practice makes it acceptable in my case. So give it a whirl, and I will catch you next time. Have a good day.